This video is sponsored by Aura. The battle between Levi Squad and the female Titan was one of Attack on Titan's most brutal moments. It showcased just how far the Titan shifters of Marley would go to get back the founding Titan, even if it meant killing people they would become friends with. It also was the first of many iterations of Squad Levi. An elite squad formed and led by Levi Ackerman, who is the right-hand man of the commander of the Survey Corps, Ervin Smith. In the series, the entire squad, Gunther, Eld, Aluo, and Petra, were wiped out in a devastating ambush. But what if some of them survived? This breakdown explores 1. Who could have survived, 2. How their survival changes the story, 3. Their likely fates in later arcs, 4. Why their survival doesn't guarantee, well, survival. Ever feel like you're being watched? Ever notice near constant calls from shady people with accents who call themselves Jim? Levi and Erwin scouts know the feeling. But it's not just Titans. Data brokers are selling your personal info like it's black market ODM gear. I googled my name and was flooded with results for not only, well, just my name, but many of my emails and other personal information. I don't have to tell you, this is absolutely ridiculous. My data sold to spammers, scammers, and who knows who without any of my consent. And removing it? Ugh. They make it harder than surviving outside the walls. On your own, you'd have to contact each of these results in Google personally, making the entire process not even worth it due to the complexity of just trying to get in touch, which could take an exorbitant amount of time instead of, enjoying your life. The Los Angeles Times reported recently that hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every single American. And this is your first step in protecting yourself. Not only that, but in 2022, Americans lost over $10 billion to online crime. Don't believe me? Take a look at this real data on a website designed to find people's information. So, let Aura scan for your information on the dark web. Say goodbye to the spam calls with the spam call protection, and let them remove your information from these shady websites that are designed to waste your time when you just want your data lawfully removed. That is why I trust and use Aura. Aura's your all-in-one shield. Dark web scans, fraud alerts, VPN, and a $5 million theft insurance. One app, total protection. Would Levi half secure the walls? No. So don't leave your back open. Try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/ctactics and let them scout the threats for you. You're not Titan fodder. Stop acting like it. So let's start off with the heartbreak. Gunther and Eld will die no matter what. There are reasons for this, as while this video focuses on what if Squad Levi survived, to get to that point there has to be a sacrifice to make this scenario work at all. Gunther is one of these people, because in the series, Gunther was the first to be killed by Annie in one of the coldest and most brutal deaths. This death is important in a series of dominoes that need to fall. Narratively, it needs to remain because this showed Annie's speed, her ruthlessness, and her precision. After all, she was trained by an elite soldier, so if Annie doesn't kill anyone, this would be problematic and make her character seem not as strong. This also creates an issue in this theory. Doesn't allowing some members to survive take away her credibility as a killer? No, but we will get into that later in the video as to why. The second death which needs to occur is Eld, as once again, this shows off an important trait of any Titan Shifter, which is their regeneration. And at this point in the series, the gag of Eren's head billowing out steam probably wasn't gonna cut it. In other words, much like Gunther's death, Eld's death was inevitable and needed to occur to establish some very important mysteries for the series. Another narrative that needs to be established is Levi's sorrow over constantly losing his friends and having a peaceful heart despite all of his rage. Short King needs to be established here as someone who has a tough exterior, but is tender and pink on the inside, just like me for real. Gunther and Eld die to serve the larger purpose of establishing Annie and Levi's narratives. Now, let's establish who is surviving, which is fairly obvious at this point. Petra is one of the survivors, which I am sure everyone is so happy for. The Nobara Kugisaki of Attack on Titan, just without the cockiness, died after being warned by Aluo, causing her to freeze for just a split second. This is where Gunther's death establishing Annie's speed came into play, but there is a chance, and a small one at that, Petra could just feasibly survive it. She would need to react faster, which would allow her to dodge Annie's blindside attack, though she wouldn't be out of the woodwork and likely would sustain such great injuries, brain damage at worst and at best, is out of the series for a good while recovering. But at the very least, she doesn't become embedded in a tree or get tossed out of the back of a wagon. But because of Petra's survival, Aluo would absolutely survive because Aluo's death was an emotional reaction to seeing Petra killed. He loses his cool, charges, and is promptly Mordored. But with Petra alive and only gravely hurt and or injured, he'd prioritize escaping and getting her to safety rather than resorting to charging forward with a suicide attack. Keep in mind as well, Petra is like 15 years old. She is a child soldier, so Aluo trying to protect a young one like her would be a very awesome moment to see. Also because Aluo is just so cool and goofy and I freaking love him, he looks like David Lynch. So with Petra and Aluo, probably two of the best characters from OG Squad Levi surviving, how does this affect the story moving forward? Well, there are so many possibilities, and all of them are actually rather interesting. In the immediate aftermath of the female Titan arc, Annie would still be forced to crystallize at the end. But the key difference is Petra and Aluo would know Annie's tricks like regeneration, hardening, things of that nature, which would provide them ahead of time with the valuable information needed in their ambush against Annie. Armin, Eren, Mikasa, and Levi would pay them a visit on Levi's suggestion after they tell their commander what they saw. This would drastically change the fight with Annie and Eren, who would come into the fight even more confident. Though, would it give him an advantage beyond that? I don't think so. And the fight would probably be mostly the same with some added Shonen Jump-esque moments where Eren recalls talking to Petra and Aluo about Annie's secret Titan Shifter abilities and how not to repeat the But this would still end in Annie crystallizing, and Armin visiting her to vent his own frustrations to a crystal while Hitch swats him with a newspaper. In other words, perfection. So here is some juicy stuff. In the Uprising arc, Nifa actually survives because of the Squad Levi surviving. And I'm sure you remember Nifa, the Petra lookalike who got her head blown off by Kenny in one of the most brutal deaths that had everyone calling out, "My waifu!" Yeah, she survives this encounter because she wouldn't be the one to take the bullet. It would probably be Petra instead. But leading up to her death, I could probably see Petra would more or less become more of an actual character, taking on Nifa's roles in Season 2 and Season 3 up until her death at the hands of Kinney. She would still retain her position in Squad Levi, but I think would grow closer to both Aluo and Levi, and sadly, I don't know. I don't think romantically for Levi, for those pining for that. Instead, I think Petra would look at Aluo as someone she could trust with her life, and Levi as just the same. Their bond would be strengthened, and we would learn so much more about Petra in the process. Her background, her upbringing, the obvious tragedy which inspired her to become a Survey Corps member, and eventually be picked for Squad Levi, and how all that occurred. This would also allow Levi to develop more emotionally, and have that aspect of his character be a little bit less subtle. I do think Petra would retain her semi-crush on Levi, but would be resolved, either through a conversation with Levi that inspires Petra to feel the need to dedicate her life to this effort, much in the same vein of how Levi felt with Erwin. Also for Aluo, he would become a regular of the series beyond Petra's death and outlive her, at least for a while. We'd also see him in a defined role in the assault against Historia's Big Daddy. But beyond that, Aluo would be tied primarily to Petra and Levi's hip narratively, and would follow the same process that Petra would.
Forward! My soldiers scream out! My soldiers rage!
But you know what, C-Tactics? I want Petra to live. I want Aluo to live. Okay, let's say Nifa still joins and is killed by Kinney. I think Nifa is cooler than Petra, but okay, just keep breaking my heart like that. Nifa dies. Petra survives. What happens to Petra, and what happens to Aluo? Well, let's go over all of the options, because they're actually all really cool. Option 1 is that Petra has to join Erwin's suicide charge against the Beastly Titan. This is probably the best way to kill Petra beyond blasting her head off. The reason for that is very simple. It would make Levi and Flock's characters much less subtle in their descents into revenge and madness, though Flock less so because, man, Flock is just an asshole, dude. Option 2 is a bit different and unlikely, but we could see Aluo and Petra assist Levi against Zeke. So instead of Levi Beyblading his way through the Titans, Zeke could very well just be cornered by 3 elite Titan-killing soldiers in the flank. But I still think at the end of this, they would need to die from something. Maybe Zeke's Titan Horde. Who knows? Option 3, they survive all together, as instead of joining Levi, they are ordered to assist those within Shinganshina against the Colossal Titan and the Armored Titan, leading to the suicide charge having the same outcome. But Petra and Aluo survive, as they are able to outmaneuver the other Titan shifters with some injuries in the process. It would be really cool if Petra, like Hanj, loses an eye or receives a gash across his or her face, because as well, I think Aluo bites his lip, causing him to have a scar on it for the rest of the series. These changes for their presentation would be right in line with the tone shift in the final season. Might as well throw some long hair on both of them too. You know what? Give Petra a mohawk. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so let's just keep going. Somehow, the best outcome happens and they make it to the final season of Attack on Titan. Ooh, goody. This season was absolutely brutal and killed off damn near every character they could by the end. So first of all, Petra and Aluo would not be important in the final season, as their characters would be wrapped up completely at least by the end of Season 3. Kinda they already were by Season 1. So in a surprise, it likely would end with Aluo surviving, or at least having the highest chance, as he would probably stick with the Alliance in the plane crash with Onion Coupon. But beyond that, there wouldn't be much significance to his survival or role. He's just there. Petra would absolutely die again, and she would die during the Jaegerist uprising, in which she is turned into a pure Titan and promptly slaughtered by Levi in the woods. Because I just think, you know, that bit of brutality fits so much with AOT. Yep, she would drink the spinal fluid wine and maybe even try to convince Levi to loosen up and drink some too, which in the end would be her downfall and make Levi's turbo murder rage even more satisfying and Zeke's death even better, and more deserved than it already was. Talk about Flock being an asshole, Zeke is right up there with him. So, yeah, I guess in this scenario, congrats, Aluo. I guess. So here is the sad truth when making this video. Squad Levi's death was much better served as it is in the show. Surviving Annie was really just a stay of execution, as either Kenny, Zeke, or even the Rumbling would eventually get them. It also would make AOT's narrative just a tad bit more crowded, even though it would be awesome to see, you know, more of Petra and Deluo. But you know what? Some things are better the way they are. The saying is, don't fix it if it ain't broken. And for good reason. Their survival at best adds almost nothing, and at worst could harm the pacing and execution of some stuff later in the final season. But I did learn something very valuable from doing this. It showed me that the Hajime Isayama we all know and love was very deliberate in how the original Squad Levi kicked off the character of Levi. Was that redundant? Without the deaths of Gunther, Eld, Aluo, and especially Petra, would Levi have been as popular as he was, at least initially? Well, I mean, probably. I mean, he's one of the most fawned over VAs in anime. Everyone loves this guy. He's short, which the ladies absolutely love, despite what the internet's idiotic insistence of the 6 foot, I don't know. And yeah, like I said before, it just wouldn't change anything at all. The best use of these characters is for Levi to watch them die and toss their bodies off the wagon. That moment absolutely needs to happen, and Isayama was cooking when he did it, let me tell ya. This, however, does reinforce Attack on Titan's core message. In this world, survival is never guaranteed, because it will catch up in due time in this world. Nobody is safe, not your waifu, not your tongue, and sure as hell, not your friends. Thank you again to our sponsor, Aura, and thank you to my patrons who got early access to this and my next Attack on Titan video before its public release. Make it a great day or not, the choice is yours.